this is just a brief section of just, I just want to level set. When I use the term success, it's very specific, and it really goes back to what I had on that other slide. It is success as seen as separate from happiness and from freedom. But in addition, it's really just as simple. It's conceiving and setting a goal, and then achieving it or not achieving it, and it's that simple. So as you approach this, always keep that in mind, that there's not a huge value judgment. I think a lot of times people think of people who are successful as being a thing. It's like a moral state that they're in, and that's really, I think, an unhelpful way of looking at things. So I think that if you can just see that in life, some people are better at setting goals and achieving them than others. That doesn't make it better. It just means they got that. They're good at that, and that you can get good at it as well. Additionally, this idea, this making decisions ideas, I've started to realize that people just making decisions is something that people don't like. They feel like they're cutting things off. Like, ooh, what if I make the wrong decision? Like, they really get into this kind of concept that it's a greater evil to make a bad decision versus making a decision at all. And I'm here to say that in certain philosophies, decisions equal life. That the more decisions you make, the more alive you are. And that the fewer decisions you make, the more dead you are. And that is something that, like, hoarders are a good example of people who have gotten to a place where they are they're pathologically incapable of making simple decisions about just like what to throw away. They just can't do it because they don't want to make the wrong choice. Good. And like, why should you care about this? And the reason that I think it goes back to this idea that I think that underlying a lot of people's general sense of dissatisfaction and general sense of anxiety is this idea of not, well, let me just get to Schwartz's point. This idea of autonomy and freedom of choice are critical to our well-being, and the choice is critical to freedom and autonomy. This idea that choosing the action, like being conscious of the action, is what creates this sense of freedom and autonomy. It just is. And so being conscious of that, in our culture, again, in the West, we just have this abundance of things. We just have access to things that just I'm reading Seneca and Marcus Aurelius. You just realize that we are in a magic time of just amazing potential. But I think we tend to be like, well, my shoes still hurt. Like we always tend to reduce it back down to something negative. But what Schwartz is basically saying is that when you take control of your decision-making processes and you make choices, that it just enriches your life. So, yeah, this was a slide I put together just dealing with things I've noticed over time, which is pretty much everybody knows what they should be doing, but nobody does it. It's just weird paradox, which is that people, I don't know, it's just the nature of being human, I think, in our current age. We possess knowledge, but we don't necessarily use knowledge. And why don't we? As I look at it, I really believe that there is, on one level, this concept of faith, of belief, and Napoleon Hill is really big into this concept of this like blinding faith, and it's this idea of being able to say, I may not know, I may never have had the experience of saving $1,000, but I believe I can save $1,000. Like that belief is vital in order to make the decision to try and do something you've never done, to sort of change yourself in a way you never have. And there's a lot of ways to not believe. I think that people experience fear all the time, and that fear can be a very healthy thing because it helps you make critical decisions, or it can be a very unhealthy thing in that it causes you to, again, not act in any way. So that's something to be aware of. Some people, I think, really feel that they need permission from authority figures, whether parents or siblings or spouses, but that there needs to be some sort of external stimulus that says, it's okay for you to want to, I don't know, buy a Maserati. Ignorance, that speaks for itself. A lot of people just don't know what they don't know, and they just don't have the curiosity to go find out. And this is an interesting thing. Don't want to stand out. As somebody who has, for the last 2 years, basically I've been deeply involved in things that I am doing. I'm very specific about what I'm doing. It's hard. A lot of people don't want to hear it. It makes them feel uncomfortable because, you ask me what I'm doing, I have a very clear vision of what I'm trying to get done. And if they want to just have another beer, it's like this weird sort of psychological imbalance that occurs, and so it can make people feel uncomfortable. And that's a challenge, that if you were going to go out and try and do something different with yourself, is being able to realize it's only really important to you, but you are going to stand out because most people just live their lives from birth to death and just kind of shrug their shoulders, that was a good enough ride. And, and then the last one is this idea of, we all tend to have secret reasons why we don't succeed, and that they're like a default move to kind of be like, oh, well, that wouldn't have happened anyway because of X. And so trying to rid yourself of limiting beliefs that there's anything that you're ever right or wrong about. Things change over time. You just need to get used to that. Okay? I do want, if there's anything that you take away from today, this idea of having a formal relationship to success or failure, it's getting these words to start to mean something very specific. I've noticed over time that we tend to use these terms, losers and winners, well, they'll be applied to people who clearly are neither. They won the lottery. That it doesn't make you anything. It doesn't make you lucky for a day or for many days if it's a big enough lottery. But that once you sort of move into a space where you've got a formal relationship to success and failure, then you start to realize that failure, they're both almost equally good. Like a really good failure actually tends to be better than a really good success, because the failure tends to bring with it more data. There's more information attached to it, that if you're being really conscious about the thing you're trying to succeed at, those failures are the things that you kind of go like, wow, I did all these things right, and yet this still happened. You get a lot out of it. But putting yourself into that relationship of saying, I'm either failing or succeeding, takes you out of what I consider to be just a horrific psychological state, where things like success or failure or winner or loser are just random things pointing at people, and that it's not based on anything. And I think that people's fear of failure often it's about this, not about what I call failure, which is something that happens when you're trying to succeed. Whereas a lot of people, I think, use the term failure to describe not trying, sitting around. And to me, that's just a sort of state of non-being. As you create a relationship to success, this concept is super important. Vague definitions of success produce vague results. So if you say something like, I want to lose weight, something horrible, nothing's going to happen. It's just too amorphous. But when you change that into something where it's like, I want to lose 5 pounds, that becomes there's some power to that, because it's very easy to know when you've done it and when you haven't done it. There's just a lot of value to it. So as you think about things like your success criteria, use that as an idea, because I think it's natural for them to start out pretty vague, because I think we think in vague ways. But just be alert to it. Think, well, that's kind of vague. Let me just keep drilling down on it. Okay, that's good. There's one other idea on there. As we were talking through this the last time, there's things that we do in our lives that I think we don't give ourselves credit for. And they tend to take up large chunks of our lives. So it's things like our families, our jobs. It's things that really, you got to do them. And that yet somehow we psychologically go, oh, I just do it. So if you can actually place those fairly big chunk things into success frameworks for yourself, you're going to get a lot of value from that because you're doing the activity anyway. So why not start to engage it at this level of success and failure, and sort of, because it just makes it more interesting and it keeps you, again, in that headspace, because this is a philosophy. And I do find things like the workspace is such a great place to like test things out, like interpersonal relationship skills, and being able to say, oh, well, for this month I'm gonna have a little sub-task on my plate where I'm gonna try my best to see if I'm gonna have better conversation with people at the office. I mean, it's just a huge available source for energy for you. But I think there's this tendency to be like, oh, it's just my family. I've seen parents who just like raising like 6 kids, and they just dismiss it like it's like, well, yeah, I'm raising my kids. I'm like, Jesus, this is amazing what you're doing. You see what you're doing with your life. It's amazing. And I just want to encourage people, so whatever you do, whatever's in your life that takes your time, that you can apply some kind of success thinking to it, do it. Give yourself some benefit from that. Okay. And then this learn to love failure is pretty much what I was saying before, is that failure, when it's ambiguous, when it's a thing that's you're sort of like you're frightened of failure and that so you won't try to do anything, that's just an unhealthy thing. It's no good. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't do anybody else any good. And I always loved the Thomas Edison quote, which was, hey, he failed to make a light bulb 10,000 times, and then the last time he succeeded. And his response when somebody asked him, like, hey, how do you make it through the tremendous, just like slog of failure? And he was just like, I just ran out of ways not to make it. And it was just like, that's how he saw life. He just saw it as being like, he had a goal, and his goal was an incandescent light bulb, and he was going to be at it until such time as he succeeded. And I think that more people could just get that in the back of their head, like, you know what, once I've made the choice, I'm going to stick with it until I'm done. So that's good. This last slide is something I just pulled out of Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, which to me is just a great little list. It's like a checklist for stuff that makes a good life. And from this, I think that you can, like if for some reason you're sitting around racking your brain, like what can I do for personal success? Just something in one of these concepts that is going to appeal to you. And so I would just, one of the things I enjoy about Hill's work is that it's just based on this huge breadth of things. And as a result, when I read this list, I was like, wow, this is really awesome, because he says it's what constitutes real riches. And it's when I realized that his book was not about making money. His book was about success. It was about this idea that you just, all you have to do is define what you think riches are, and then you can take these processes and approach it. So that is a good deal. Okay.
And which book is this one?
It's called Think and Grow Rich.
Okay.
And it's at the end of, I've got a...
The 12 Riches from Napoleon Hill?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we can search it online.
Okay, yeah, and I've got it in the back of this document, and I'll post this to the meetup site.
Okay, that will be good.
So we got all that.
Think and Grow Rich is the name of the book.
Genius. Okay.
Just lost my copy.
Well, no, the copy I really like isn't printed anymore. It's really sort of, the other ones are a little shoddy. I love that book. But okay, we'll get on to our next slide. And